hand it to you. It's not hot in the room, it's hot though in upstairs. So let's get ready.
Okay.
You'll have to be very quiet. I don't have it on yet. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, let's go.
We'll go up.
I'll wait till you get up before I try.
Okay. Okay.
So you don't hear all of us.
All right.
Can we sit in front for a bit?
Yeah. So exciting.
Hi, how are you? Nice to meet you. Good to meet you. Hey, how are you? Do you want us up there or down here?
You want to sit down here for right now? Sure. And then we'll go up on stage in a little.
Good to see you. Nice to see you.
Can you get it on?
Yeah.
It's on. Okay. All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. I'm Professor Jonathan Moshberger. I teach political science at Brookdale, chair the department. I also coordinate our honors program, but it is such an honor to be here today as our host. It's really exciting time. So welcome to Brookdale, a dynamic institution for higher learning where we strive to always make a positive difference in the lives of our students through programming like this and so much more. Speaking of dynamic, it is my privilege to introduce somebody that I'm so proud of and honored to have as our president, Dr. David Stout.
Thank you so much, Professor. Thank you, Professor, for organizing this and for making sure that we have an opportunity to meet with a governor of many firsts. And I know that you know this, and I know you're going to hear a bio in just a minute. But I want to thank you, Professor, for all the work that you do, the Civic Engagement Conference, for putting this event together so that we have an opportunity to meet with our former governor. So, Christie Todd Whitman, right? She's a person of many firsts. A first female governor in New Jersey, first and only female governor in New Jersey. First female to be offered the opportunity to do an address to the response to the State of the Union address by herself as a female. First appointment to the first African American appointment to the state Supreme Court, right? First female chief of staff. First female. I'm sorry.
General. First female attorney general.
First female attorney general. First. And first governor to be honored with an honorary champion of the WWF. Right? Many firsts. So I wanted, obviously, to welcome you. Thank you so much for being here. It's quite an honor to have you here with us here in this institution. If you may not know that much of what we have that we take advantage of here in higher education is a result of the work of Governor Whitman. The support of the Rutgers-Brookdale partnership, the Rutgers-Brookdale partnership would not exist if it wasn't for the work that Governor Whitman did. So many firsts. Hello, Assemblywoman Flynn, and congratulations on your reelection. So welcome to Brookdale. Welcome everyone here, and I know we're going to enjoy an incredible time with this absolutely fabulous and incredibly dynamic former governor of ours. We're so privileged to have you here. Thank you, everybody, for being here, and thank you for honoring us with your presence. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Stout. So today is a really special day, everyone. I can't believe it's here. It was so much time and effort and energy in planning. A lot of preparation went to it. So there's so many people to thank for making this special day possible. I could not have done it without the support of some pretty incredible people, most especially my colleagues and students, who I'm so grateful for. To everyone who helped out to make this day possible, thank you so much. I am eternally grateful. The thing is, we have some amazing people at Brookdale. We really, really do. Our students especially, our colleagues. It makes me so proud, so happy. I love my job. It's the most incredible thing in the world. So I really, really love Brookdale in every single sense. It's a home to me. It really is. This place is home. And I'm very pleased to welcome a very special guest to our house today, and to make her an honorary member of our Brookdale family. Let me tell you, this is a highlight of my professional career, and it is such an honor to be afforded this opportunity. So, without further ado, Governor Christie Todd Whitman is the president. Oh, go ahead, yeah. Oh, I was supposed to remind you to silence your phones. I forgot. Okay, just a business item. Christie Todd Whitman is the president of the Whitman Strategy Group, a consulting firm that specializes in helping leading companies find innovative solutions to environmental challenges. Governor Whitman served in the cabinet of President George W. Bush as administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency from January of 2001 until June of 2003. She was the 50th governor of the state of New Jersey, serving as its first woman governor from 1994 until 2001. She's the author of a 2005 New York Times bestseller, It's My Party Too. Governor Whitman serves a number of nonprofit organizations, including chairman of the American Security Project, vice chairman of the trustees of the Eisenhower Fellowships, executive committee on the National World War II Museum, member of the boards of directors of World Food Program USA and the Meridian Institute. She is co-chair of the Forward Party, the state's United Democracy Center, the Joint Ocean Initiative Leadership Council, and the Aspen Institute K-12 Climate Action Task Force, and the National Institute for Civil Discourse. Love it. She is founding member of the Climate Leadership Council and senior fellow at the Kettering Foundation. Everyone, please welcome Governor Christie Todd Whitman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Governor.
Good morning, or afternoon,
It's afternoon now?
just about.
Yeah. Governor, I'm so incredibly grateful for this opportunity. I can't thank you enough for giving of your time to be here with us today.
My pleasure.
It's such an honor. It's such an incredible honor, really the honor of my professional career. So
You'll do
thank
better.
you so much.
Don't worry, you'll do better. I have faith.
I don't know. So we ready?
Absolutely.
All right, let's do this. So we have some questions for our esteemed governor. The first one, we want to talk a little bit about her early life. So what is the earliest political memory you can recall? Or a political event that stands out, and maybe why that one comes to mind?
Well, probably the first political event is attending the counting of the ballots at the Oldwick Firehouse with my mother when she was an observer. And we had the paper ballots back then, and everybody used to sit around. It was very collegial. There were no arguments. Everybody was checking every ballot, made sure, and it all went smoothly. But I remember it particularly because I got to stay up late. So that was fun.
Terrific. That's terrific. Wow.
But the other sort of really impressive moment for me was in 1956 at the convention in San Francisco. My mother was in charge of the program. And so it was, back in those days, you didn't have the kind of security you have now. People were pretty easy about things. And at the end, after Dwight Eisenhower had given his acceptance speech, Ma got me down to the stairs where he was coming down the front off the podium. Nobody disappeared in the back. He came down the front, And because she'd been out there early organizing it, she had to get rid of me, because I'm the youngest of 4 by 8 years, and so I was always the tag along. And so she sent me off to a camp where I did one of those, the fake leather and the fake plastic, and you sew something together, and I sewed a golf tee holder together. And so when Eisenhower came down the platform, I gave him that golf tee holder. And the thing that was really amazing was the next day in the papers, he was leaving San Francisco. The press said to him, "What are you going to do next?" And he held up my thing
wow.
with the golf tees in it. So
Wow. That's incredible.
the fact that he'd keep this lousy little thing made by a 10-year-old.
It's terrific.
And
Really, really a
9-year-old.
great story. I wanted to continue along those lines. Can you please share a favorite memory that you have, in addition to that one, of your family's involvement in politics in your early years?
Well, I don't think there's a favorite moment, but
Okay.
because I was the youngest and my siblings were off at school, I was the one sitting at the dining room table with my parents, listening to the conversation about what was happening in the world, in the United States, in New Jersey, and in the local community. And so it was always fascinating, and I grew up loving policy, loving those kinds of discussions and things. So I was very lucky to have that.
Great. That's really great. I know your family was really involved in politics, right? For
They
a
were.
long time.
They were introduced to one another at the 1933 Republican National Convention.
Wow.
So it goes way back, to say the least. And yes, my father was Republican state chairman for 10 years. My mother was Republican National Committee woman for 10 years. My grandmother was head of the Federation of Republican Women in the state. My other grandfather, that was my mother's mother, on my father's side, his father was a fundraiser for the Republicans. So I was steeped in Republican politics, as we say. A different Republican politics than we have today.
Right.
I would
That's for
add.
sure.
Yeah.
Right. And we'll get into maybe a little bit more of that later. Do you happen to recall an early political discussion you had in life? Maybe your first one? And if you do, maybe why it stands out. Was it in school? Was it at home? Was it with parents or grandparents?
Well, probably the one that stands out the most for me when I was in the last year of high school in New York. There was no civics class, and we didn't have that. And it was 64, so it was an election year. And none of my classmates sort of focused on it at all. And of course, I was deep into this. So I went to the headmistress and I said, "May I put on a convention?" And she was very skeptical, but I argued with her enough that she said, "Fine, you can have one." There was one open period where you were supposed to discuss current events. It was a current events class, and we had the gymnasium. And so I put on a convention. Because we only had one period to do it, and we couldn't have all the candidates, so you had to pick the top candidates. But what I did is I polled the students to say who did they think were the most important candidates, and took the top 2. And the thing I will remember at that point, Julie Eisenhower, Tricia and Julie Eisenhower, Tricia was in my class, Julie was a class below. They were only in the school for a year or two. Julie was furious at me because Nixon didn't make it. That's until the list. And we had the convention, so they at least knew what a convention was. And that was kind of an educational thing for me and for them.
Yeah. I love it. That was wonderful, really wonderful. I have a couple others along those lines. Did you ever feel like a minority of one in a political discussion? That you were the only one that had those views and maybe
Well,
tried
it
to
wasn't
convince
so much the
others?
views, it was as often the only one who cared. People didn't talk about it, people didn't, and students weren't paying any attention, people weren't paying any attention. So it was more that I was often the only one who cared and who could talk about the issues or wanted to talk about the issues.
Wow. So even then, the students were sort of apathetic to it?
Yeah,
Didn't
they were
really-
it didn't bother their everyday lives.
Wow.
It didn't impinge, they didn't think it impinged on their everyday lives. They
Yeah.
didn't, they weren't thinking long-term of what the decisions that needed to be made and what
Right.
was important and what wasn't.
Well, let's talk about civics. You said you didn't have civics in high school, right? I didn't have it either. A lot of our students didn't have that experience.
We had current events.
Okay.
So I guess that was as close as you came to civics. But I know nowadays we barely teach it at all. And I think that's one of the roots of our problems that we're having today, because people don't understand about how government works and the importance of local government, the importance of the three branches. I mean, you ask people, what are the three branches of government, and they can't answer you. And we've gotten lazy about our democracy. We've taken it for granted, and that's why I think we're in a very perilous place right now.
I wholeheartedly agree with everything that you've said. What are your thoughts about requiring civics in high school and maybe even at the college level? Perhaps an American government course or intro to political science?
I think there definitely ought to be. I mean, people ought to learn about, in this country, we ought to learn about our history, all of our history. I'm talking about not just the nice parts, because we're human and we're an experiment and we've made mistakes and we shouldn't hide them. We should be willing to discuss everything so that we know not to make the mistakes again, and we can watch out for trends that we see developing that may lead us to a bad place. And so we need to teach our American history. We need to teach, so at least if it's not American history per se, at least civics, so that you know how the government works and why it's important to pay some attention.
Absolutely. I am so passionate. A lot of my students know this, but I'm so passionate about civics education. It's been something that's been lax for so long, and we need to reinvigorate it. You know, I believe strongly that we need to require it, especially at the high school level, maybe junior, senior year, when students are coming of age. With coming of age comes all sorts of important rights, privileges, and responsibilities. And this certainly is one. How can we foster better outcomes in our system, our democratic processes? Well, by having civics, you know, where students would be engaged with the material, where they would really know about everything in terms of governance, the Constitution, the branches of government and their functionings, what's our roles as citizens living in this system, how can we bring about better outcomes? So I completely agree. I would love to have it at the college level as well, you know, where the students are gaining more maturity and can grasp these concepts firmly, and we can really create, I would say, generations of reform-minded students, ones who want to create better change, ones who want to bring certain policies to fruition that are going to make a difference for, you know, for all of us in our future prosperity. We actually have a petition. It's over on the side table to see if anybody was interested in maybe signing on to it. It's about requiring a political science course at the college level in New Jersey. I don't know if that's something that you would agree with or not, or if folks in the audience, if it's something that you like and it would resonate with you. We have that petition over there, and it's something I feel strongly about. You know, I'm of course biased. I teach political science, but I'm so passionate about this stuff. It's so important for all of us, you know, in our lives. So thank you, Governor. That's great. You're passionate about civics, just like me. And it seems like I saw a lot of head shaking, in the audience, right? It's so important for us. I have an important one. I think I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this one. How important is it for people in love to share the same ideas about politics? Does that matter, or does it not matter so much? Or maybe it depends.
Nowadays, they don't get close if they don't have the same. Their parents wouldn't allow it. There'd be no discussion. You know, I think people should have their own opinions and be able to have a civil discussion about it and understand that the other person may disagree with you, but that doesn't mean they're evil, and it doesn't make them your enemy, and you can have differences of opinion on various subjects. Certainly, John and I did. We didn't agree on everything. We agreed on all the important things, but we'd have our differences of opinion, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And we've got to get over this idea that you're automatically my enemy because you don't agree with me, or you're wrong. The most important thing there is to listen and to try to figure out why they hold an opinion that's different than yours, and then talk about it and see where maybe you might change your opinion too. And reach that middle ground, which is always there.
Absolutely. And that's what we need to do a better job of. I often tell my students that as best as possible, we need to try to put ourselves in the shoes of another. Try to see things from their perspective, to truly listen, to hear what they're saying. because we didn't live their life, right? And didn't have the accumulated experience that they have had to lead them to be this person that they are and hold the core values that they hold dear and their different beliefs. If we could do a better job with civil discourse and communication, I think we would be leagues better than where we find ourselves today.
Without question.
And you had, I noticed on the bio, that you're into civil discourse as well.
Right. That was something that was started by Tom Daschle, former Democrat Senate Majority Leader. And it's in the Arizona State University we work with, but the headquarters actually are in Washington. And we've done a lot of work with legislators and new legislators coming in to train them on how to talk to one another and how to start looking at the issues. We engage in public discourse. We have about 30,000 people who have agreed to give time to discuss issues. We go to the Congress actually and ask them, what are the issues that you think are the most ripe for discussion or are the most important pressing issues? And then we take 4 or 5 and we give them to the people who are engaged with us and say, which of these issues do you care about the most? And then what we'll do, is we'll give them about 3 issues that the Congress identifies. And then we give them the pros and cons on each issue. And then it's up to them to decide which issues they like and which approaches they like, which approach we try to get it down to 1 at the end of the day. And then we send it out and we get a consensus on it. And the only thing that's required of them beyond reading all of this and spending time, I forget how many hours they agree to give us in a year, we then say, communicate to your congressperson or senator where this came out. And you can perfectly well say, and I don't agree with the majority here, but we want you to engage with them, let them know. And we've been very influential, actually, in the no surprise billing bill was something that we worked on closely with the Congress. We worked closely with them on the infrastructure bill on trying to find the language that worked so that people were comfortable and you could get both sides together to actually make progress. So we've done a lot of that kind of work.
That's wonderful. Really, really great. I have another big one.
Responders with the unions and everything, and every day they said, please tell them to wear the masks, and couldn't get them to do it. And then putting out the fire. We were asking them to put out the fire in October, and they didn't until November. And every time you pulled off a beam, you get another release. And while the air quality in lower Manhattan in general, as far as the scientists were telling me, was safe to breathe, always, every time, I always said, but on the pile, you've got to wear a respirator. And they didn't. Of course, we were in the middle of that, and then we had the anthrax attack. That happened at the same time, and we were responsible for cleaning up those buildings, and particularly the Hart Senate office building, which, I mean, again, you've never had anything of this size, anthrax, and that's complicated because it had rugs and file cabinets and papers and all sorts of things we had to clean up. And the people living up on Capitol Hill were very nervous that we were going to be throwing out all the anthrax spores into the air in general. And I called the CDC, Center for Disease Control, and said, what is a standard for anthrax spores? I mean, can you live with 1 spore, 2 spores? What is it? And they said, we don't have a standard. You said it. So I had to set it at 0. I mean, there was just no question in my mind. It was 0. So that was a very complicated cleanup. And then we had to do it up in New York at, I always forget whether it was CBS or NBC that got the letter and got contaminated. And of course, the post office here in New Jersey.
Right. Yeah, I had forgot about the anthrax scare that came so close to 9/11.
And then we had the Challenger exploding coming in on re-entry.
Yeah.
And NASA wanted our response people there because there were components of the rocket that might have been problematic for human health. So my first responders were out there too. So we were spread pretty thin, and they were working hard. They were a great group of people.
Yeah, I imagine, I of course remember, 9/11 and living through that and the emotional experience of it, but serving in the capacities that you served and having to deal with that, and the situation literally, on the ground, must have been trying for sure.
Well, it was one of those things. I didn't I wasn't one who had the television set on in my office all the time,
Okay.
and I was in a meeting with people from the White House, and I had actually my first responders outside. I was going to have a meeting with them, and my son called. It was his first week on his first job from college, and he was in Building 7 down there, and which was the third building to go down. And he called me and he said, "Mom, look at the television. Have you seen what's happened? A plane flew into the World Trade Center, and stuff is coming down, and a body went by my window, and it looks like putty on the ground." I mean, it was, and he was really upset. And I said, "Get out of there." I said, "Just go home." I thought it was some idiot who tried to fly between the towers, because people do that. And then I turned it on and saw the other. My husband was in China, so he was no use. Actually, he was worse than no use, because he called. He called. Once the second tower was hit, I tried to get my son. I couldn't get him, because all the services were down then. And then John calls from China, and I said, "What building is Taylor in?" Because I wasn't sure. It was his first job. He said, "Oh, I think he's in Building 2. I go, "Great." And so I can't get him. My daughter was working at Labor Department at that time, and Elaine Chao closed down Labor right away. I did not close down EPA until the vice president said all government had to close down, because where was I going to put the people? We heard the plane go into the Pentagon. We were afraid that something was going to happen at the White House, which of course the heroes in Pennsylvania were able to stop that and that plane. The metro was closed, so you couldn't put them out on the street. So, and I knew we had work to do, because the people up in, actually our staff up in Region 2 in New York, which our offices overlook the World Trade Center, within a couple of hours they were across the river. Within an hour, actually, they were across the river at our emergency response center, setting up for what they needed to do and air quality monitoring and things. And Kate, my daughter, came over to my office. I was talking to my first responders, saying, "Okay, what do we do? How do we deploy? What's our next steps? Should our next steps be?" And the phone rings, and I hear her pick it up and say, "Taylor," and I must have knocked her across the room to jump across to grab the telephone to make sure it was okay.
Oh my goodness! Wow, so impactful for sure. You know.
Oh yeah, it was a tough time for everybody. Everybody, particularly in New Jersey, we lost a lot of people. I lost a lot of good friends. One fellow was like a third brother. You know, everybody did. Everybody had those stories of people they knew and how it impacted their communities.
Right. Yeah, even especially in our area, there was a lot of people that commuted into the city, and really, I mean,
I was
really,
here for
really
services
sad.
at Homedale and other places because of that.
Yeah. So unbelievably, a lot of our students today weren't even born.
I know.
I can't believe it's that many years ago now, and they weren't even born for 9/11, and they didn't get to witness your governorship. So I wanted to tell them a bit about it, and so now we're going to turn our attention to your time as our governor. Can you please tell our students, especially because a lot of us who are older lived through it, but especially for the students, a little bit about your experience, some of the things that you tried to do, some of the things that you did do. What are you most proud of during your time as governor?
Well, the thing about being governor, first of all, you have to understand, and for the students particularly, that the governorship of New Jersey, when I was governor, was the most powerful governorship in the country. Because of several changes that they'd made in the Constitution in 1947. And one of them was, when I was governor, first of all, as governor of New Jersey, you don't have anybody else running on the ticket. Everybody else is appointed, whereas most states have an attorney general or a secretary of state or a state treasurer who are elected by the people, which means, I mean, that's good and bad. It means that you could often have somebody who was an attorney general or a secretary of state who wanted to be governor and was undermining you the whole time. Whereas this way, at least the people knew who to blame. I mean, sure, you had a legislature you had to work with, and you had a Supreme Court, so you have to stay within the law. But if you didn't get things done with everybody being your appointee, you better have a pretty good explanation as to why you didn't. The other thing was that most governors at that time had what was known as a line item veto for the budget, which meant you could change any of the numbers in the budget, and it took 2/3 override in the assembly to vacate it. But I was the only governor that had a tool called a conditional veto, which meant in any piece of legislation, as long as I stayed within the intent of the bill, I could rewrite it, and it took a 2/3 vote to override. So that made it a really, you could really make change. You could really get things done. And, you know, you try not to use the conditional veto very often. I didn't, but I did. The only time I ever got overridden on a veto was a conditional veto. But the thing about being governor is you're responsible for so many different things. It's really hard to pick out one thing that you care about that is the most impactful. I mean, people will often refer to the open space initiative, saving the 1 million acres of open space, which we're still working on. Haven't gotten to that yet, although New Jersey, on a percentage basis, has saved more farmland than any other state in the nation. And we've preserved about 40% of our, we should be proud of ourselves. And we've voluntarily preserved 40% of our land mass, which is a pretty incredible statement, and we continue to do it, which is great. So, I mean, there are just too many things, whether it was redoing welfare as we did it, whether it was living up to my promise of a 30% income tax cut over 3 years and still balancing the budget and leaving the state with the biggest rainy day fund and a surplus that it had when I left. Wow. You know, there are just a lot of different things. Pension reform, a lot of stuff.
That's terrific. Really great. I remember some of those things for sure.
And blowing up the Board of Higher Education, that was, and giving the universities some freedom to,
oh my goodness,
to act like grown-ups, which I presumed they were because they were universities, but you know, go figure.
I'm trying to remember, but I can't exactly recall the makeup of the legislature at the time.
It was Republican.
It was Republican,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how was it like working with the leadership and in terms of getting what you want?
I often wished that I had one house that was a Democratic house, just because you need somebody to bounce off of. It's not healthy to have everything in the hands of one party. And, you know, we didn't always agree. I probably started off wrong because I had made the promise of a 30% tax cut, income tax cut over 3 years. And after I was elected, the press was always, well, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to cut taxes. No, what are you really going to do? I said, I'm going to cut taxes. And then they went to the legislators and asked them. And then I heard back, they were saying, well, you know, when you get in office, you see things are different and the state has problems, and we'll see how it goes. Which led me to believe they weren't going to be exactly on my team on this. And so it was the year that Bill Clinton had retroactively increased the income tax. And I said, so I made a decision, and at my inaugural, when I was giving my inaugural speech, and this was my mistake, I hadn't given any heads up to the legislative leadership, which was all sitting behind me on the stage. And so part of the speech I said, if Bill Clinton can retroactively increase your taxes, I can retroactively decrease your taxes. And I was handed an executive order that I signed right there on the podium, starting the first cut of the income tax. Well, of course, the audience went wild. I think they went wild in another way, but it probably didn't start me off on the best foot with the legislature, I have to admit, even though they were Republicans.
Oh, jeez. It's a great story.
Some of the biggest things, what we did with auto insurance, what we did with some of the other big ones, I did with the Democratic leadership.
Yeah. It's great. I love that story. I want to continue with your career as governor, but I want to even backtrack a little bit and talk about how you were a pioneer in the field and how you broke through barriers and what it was like to serve as the first woman governor in the state's history.
Well, I can't answer that because I've never been a male governor. And I don't mean to be flip about it. I mean, I don't mean to be flip about it, but you're a governor, and that's all you do. You don't think about you're a female governor.
Yeah, right.
I mean, sure, there are times that the press would do stupid stuff about comment on how I was dressed or something like that, and you just have to ignore it and figure that's their problem, not yours. Right. I mean, you don't feed the beast, so if they were commenting on my tweed suit with pearls, I probably wouldn't wear that combination again, just so they couldn't keep talking about it. And they did start to say, well, my husband was giving me all my ideas on the economy. And so John just never came to the State House. he was giving me all the good ideas, of course, at night, but he didn't have to do it in public. So you just don't feed the beast. But beyond that, it's probably the biggest, and that wasn't surprise, but something that I hadn't thought about as being a role model, which of course you are when you're in everybody's a role model who is in any kind of position, frankly. We all are role models all the time. But being the first female governor meant that it opened the eyes of a lot of people that you could do this as a female. Women tend to be more tentative about taking on positions about which they don't know a lot. I've never had that problem, which probably is a problem in itself. But, when Tom Kane asked me to be president of the State Board of Public Utilities, I knew nothing about regulating gas and oil. And we did gas, we did oil, we did water, and the biggest one was the telephones, because it was right after Judge Green had broken up AT&T, and there were things like interlotas and intralotas. And the only thing I knew about was garbage, as having been a freeholder. Back in those days, we were freeholders.
Right.
Because we did garbage, and I did garbage. I was always given those kinds of things. And so the Board of Public Utilities at that point did regulate garbage, so I figured, okay, I'll take it on. It gives me an ability to be in a governor's cabinet. It gives me an ability to get to know the whole state better, because it was a statewide position. And, I just did what I tend to do always, is called in all the people from the various parts of the board and said, what are your biggest problems? What are the biggest challenges you see coming? Where do we need to be focusing our attention? And listen to them, because as your students will learn, and I think probably most of the adults in the room have learned, there's always going to be somebody who knows more about something than you do, because it's been their life. And if you walk into a position where you have a staff or a crew that has been dedicated to that over years, don't try to micromanage them. Learn whom you can trust. Learn about the issues. I don't mean ignore the issues. Learn about them. But don't think you have to control everything. And with my cabinet, I grew up, in Hunterdon County fox hunting. And I've always used a riding analogy, saying I'd always rather have a horse I had to rein in than one I had to kick. And so with the cabinet, you try to find your best people. But if you're going to spend your time looking over their shoulder and micromanaging them, you're not going to get much out of them. And what I would do is say, okay, here's what I want to do. Here's the concept. You tell me if I'm crazy. You tell me if you think I'm wrong. If you convince me, great. If you don't, then figure out how to get it done. And I only had a couple of times where I had cabinet members that got out ahead of me, and I'd have to pull them back a little bit.
Nice.
But I've been convinced over time, particularly, that if you want the best people, you've got to respect that process that you used in picking them, and respect the talent that they bring, and allow them to make some of their own decisions.
Yeah. Are you surprised there hasn't been another female governor yet?
I'm disappointed.
Yeah.
Very disappointed, because it's ridiculous. We're better than half the electorate. John always used to say, I don't know what's wrong with you guys. You're more than half the electorate. You could run the world. I said, well, we don't all think alike, so that could be a start.
Yeah.
But no, we do have to do better at that. We're getting better, but because there was a period of time where just a couple of months, I was the only female governor, but then there were only two of us or three of us for a long time. Now it's much better. But
yeah, we've made some progress for sure, but we definitely have a long way to go still.
And people of color too. I mean, you need people who have different life experiences, who have different ways of looking at issues, who have different ways of problem solving at the table to make some of these decisions. If you want to get, our problems are so complex, and our society is so complex, that no one group has all the answers, and you need a good mix in order to come up with the kinds of solutions that will stand the test of time.
Absolutely. So similarly to your experience as governor, what was it like to leave the state from your governorship to head down to D.C. to be the administrator for the EPA, and maybe what also led to you taking that leap and leaving the governorship?
Well, I didn't want to go to EPA. I did push back a little bit and said, I really think I can serve you better at the UN or at Commerce, because we'd done a lot in New Jersey on, we'd lost 350,000 jobs when I became governor, and the previous governors tenure, and the private sector had brought into the state 450,000 jobs by the time I left. So, you know, I'd done a lot of trade missions and things, so, but that job had already been promised to someone from a good friend of the Bushes. And I was pro-choice, so I was not going to go to the United Nations because they make decisions about women's rights. And so it was EPA, and it's pretty hard to turn down a president-elect when you're asked to serve at the national level. And also in this state, because the governor is so powerful, the last year of a governorship, you're not going to get anything new done. All the legislature cares about is who's going to be the next governor. And so no rocking the boat at that time. And, you know, I enjoyed doing new things. I enjoyed getting new programs through. So I was kind of looking at it. It was going to be a holding action. And when a president-elect asks you to serve, it's a privilege. I mean, there's no question about it. It is a privilege.
It is. It is for sure. What are you most proud of during your time as EPA administrator?
Well, we got a lot of things done, actually. We got the first piece of legislation through Congress, environmental piece of legislation passed since 1970 and 2001 on brownfields legislation, which was something we'd done here in New Jersey, and we took to Washington, and because I had a team of people from New Jersey who came with me, and it was an idea that worked well here, and so we got it through Congress, and it was the first one. We got water-based watershed management programs done, nutrient trading, watershed management. There were a number of things we did that were very positive. We got the thing that blew me away is I'm simple-minded in this way. I don't know how you measure how far you've gotten if you don't know where you started. And there'd never, ever been a report card on the environment in New Jersey. I mean, in the United States. Never, ever. And so I said, right, we want to do this. I want to know where we are so we know where we have to go. And the scientists and everybody at the agency did an incredible job putting this together. It's a really good document. It was supposed to have been updated every 10 years, every 5 years, and of course that hasn't happened. But the only sticking point was climate change back then and even. And the administration just didn't want to hear about it. And I said, but it's a big issue. We can't just ignore this. And the language that they gave me to put in the report was so simplistic that I thought this is just going to undermine the credibility of the whole report. So all we put in was a paragraph that said climate change is an emerging issue, and here are the most recent studies, or an important emerging issues, and here are the most recent studies. And that's the best I could get out of them. But we got the report done, and the rest of it is really good.
That's great, really great. Besides climate change, what do you think are the most pressing environmental issues right now, and maybe what can we do to address them?
I've said for a long time, water quantity and quality is the #1 issue.
Yeah.
In spite of the fact that we seem to get inundated every spring, we're not making more water. And the need to conserve or to be mindful. The hardest thing to get people to understand is the cumulative impact of individual behavior. I mean, you think, okay, if I turn off the water when I'm brushing my teeth, what difference is that going to make? Well, you can save between 5 to 10 gallons when you do that, 5 to 7 gallons probably, when you turn off the water. And if you do it, and then your neighbor does it, and the person down the road does it, all of a sudden you're seeing a significant reduction in water usage. One of the biggest thing back then, and of course your students won't have a clue about the Exxon Valdez spill, but it was at the time the largest environmental disaster that we'd had up in Alaska. Well, every 8 months along the coastline of the United States, there's as much oil released as was released during the Exxon Valdez spill. And that's from non-point source pollution. It's from people changing the oil in their car and dumping it on the driveway. It's from people making individual decisions of not taking care of things like that. And that's what leads to dead zones off our coasts and environmental degradation. And it's from individual, largely. I mean, it's not totally, obviously, but individual behavior has a huge impact. So one of the things we did is we started a pilot program with meteorologists in the Washington, Maryland area, because people pay the most attention to the news when it's the weather, because that impacts us directly. So that's when they're paying attention. So what we did with the meteorologists is said, asked them to, when they were reporting the weather, and it looked like there was going to be a rainstorm, to try to educate people to say it's not a good time to fertilize your lawn. It's not a good time to put pesticides down, because even if you don't live on a stream, you are part of a watershed. And we're going to have a heavy rain. That's going to wash it all off. It's going to go into a storm drain. That storm drain drains into a river somewhere, and that drains into the Atlantic, and that's or the Pacific if you're on the west coast. And you know, first of all, you waste your money doing it at that time, and you're causing real pollution. It's causing a real problem. And that seemed to work for a while, but they didn't continue with it, as far as I know.
Yeah, it's a shame. So I have some other thoughts here that I wanted to share with you and ask you, what are your thoughts about the current political climate? Have you seen anything like it ever before?
Not in my lifetime.
Oh, wow.
I mean, around the Civil War, yeah, I mean, they would bash each other over the head and shoot each other and things. But no, I mean, I am seriously, seriously worried about our democracy. It is frail, and it is hanging on. The 2020 election was saved by a few people who were willing to stand up and say, no, I'm sorry, the election wasn't stolen, we're in the right place. And they refused to give in spite of some of the terrible stuff that was thrown their way, literally and figuratively. I mean, they were attacked, they were demeaned, they were, one of our forward candidates in Philadelphia, Seth Bluestein, who was city commissioner in Philadelphia, was anti-Semitic attacks. His family was attacked, he was attacked, and he held firm on the count. And we can't keep depending on those people, because a lot of them, particularly the ones that have the real institutional knowledge, have been there for a while, are quitting, because they're just saying, this isn't worth it. I'm being attacked. I don't want to put my family through this. It's just not worth it. And the other side that wants to still revisit the 2020 election and still objects to anybody that says anything different is very, very active. And they've got a number of legislators around the country and legislatures that are passing bills that make it more difficult for people to vote, they cause questions on the ballot still on 2020, and are looking for ways to undermine the security of our process.
With that in mind, do you feel optimistic or rather pessimistic about America's future?
Nervous.
Nervous, yeah.
I
me
won't
too.
say I'm optimistic. I'm not sure I'd go that far as to say optimistic. I'm hopeful, but because there are a lot of good people who are working on protecting our democracy.
Right.
Forward Party, I really believe, is going to be impactful. The States United Democracy Center, we work with governors, attorneys generals, secretaries of states, police, to help secure the vote, to help them with, we give them legal advice, we give them policy advice. We're non-political, totally, but excuse me, we've worked with police to help educate them on what poll workers can and can't do, what their responsibilities are, what they can and can't do. We also move forward on lawsuits to hold people accountable for their behavior. We were very early on appealing to the California bar to hold John Eastman accountable for some of the incorrect information that he knew was incorrect, advice he was giving the president. So there are a lot of really good people working on that. And Forward, and I'll just tell you a little bit about Forward Party. Forward Party came from 3 existing parties. There was the Serve America movement, which was started by David Jolly, a former Republican congressman in Florida. There was the Renew America movement, which was started by a fellow called Miles Taylor, who was anonymous in the New York Times. He did a big article on the Trump administration, Homeland Security. He worked there under Trump. And then there was Andrew Yang, who ran for president as a Democrat, Forward Party, that he kept after his election. And the 3 of us were each in our own way trying to bring the 2 major parties back to the center, and decided that this isn't working. We were trying to do it within the structure. That wasn't going to work, because the parties like the control they have. So we said, right, we've got we'll do much better if we join together, bipartisan, work together to try to do this. We are unlike other parties because we are focused on the local level. We are not playing in the presidential, except in a way I will describe. But Forward Party at the federal level is a party of principles. We're not taking positions on things like abortion, guns, all climate change, because we believe it has to come. What's important to states is going to be different. What's important in New Jersey is what's not. It's not going to be what's important in Arizona or Nevada or California, and that candidates should be able to speak to the issues that are important to them and to their constituents, and not be told by a party in Washington what they can and can't do, think, say. And so we are focused on the local level, on your school board, your library commission, your town council, your mayors, your state legislatures, your governors. We will be endorsing some congressional and senatorial candidates. We've only been in full operation on the ground about 8 months. We're on the ballot in Florida, Utah. We're on the ballot in South Carolina, Maine. There are about two, three other states, I believe, but we've run candidates. We will support a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent as long as they're willing to sign our pledge that says, shocker, you agree to uphold the Constitution, respect the rule of law, work with anyone to solve problems, or doesn't matter who, and work continuously to improve the electoral system. I mean, we particularly like ranked choice voting, open primaries. Here in New Jersey, that's probably not going to happen because we don't have citizens initiative. So there is a piece of legislation in the legislature for fusion voting, which would allow a candidate to be endorsed by a number of different parties, which would help dilute some of the power of the two major parties. And then we're working, as I said, to identify these candidates. We're fleshing out that pledge. It's going to be more in depth. But those are the basic principles, because we think policy should be based on principles, and the policy should be different for the states. And people don't always understand how tight the control is by the parties. But in 1997, after my re-election, I was asked to run for the U.S. Senate. And I didn't particularly want to, but I said, okay, I'll go down and talk to them. I went down, talked to the Republican Senatorial Campaign Committee in 1997 and was told, point blank, if you say one word about campaign finance reform, you'll get no help from us. And that's the kind of control the parties have. So when members get in, they're stuck. There are over 500,000 elective offices across the United States, and in any given year, 70% of those are uncontested. There's only one person you can vote for. And of those, 5 to 10% are never even filled. And our feeling is every voter should have a choice, and every office should be filled. So that's where we're concentrating on, for 2024, on 6 of the major states. On the states, frankly, where Biden won by a small percentage point. And our purpose is to get forward candidates out there who are centrist, who are sensible, who will work with anyone, who will really focus on getting issues done. And that will bring people to the polls if it's for your local mayor, your local school board, because people know about them, they see them. And we've seen this work. It'll bring people to the polls who might not have gone otherwise because they're not going to like their choices at the top. And once they get there and they see candidates that they like, then they start to look up the ballot to see if their candidates up ballot, which we hope would come out with a more sensible end.
Well, that's fantastic. I love the work that you're doing now. It's really important work, critical.
We're here in New Jersey. We have a New Jersey Forward. We had actually the 23rd electoral district, the legislative candidates, the Democratic legislative candidates were all forwardists.
Great. It's terrific.
We're trying to build more.
What advice do you have for some of our young people if they want to get involved in politics?
Well, the first thing is to know why. Pick an issue that you care about, the ones that really bother you or that you feel passionate about, and find out where decisions are being made that impact that particular issue, whether it be at the local level or the state level or the federal level, and get involved. You can get involved either through supporting a party, supporting a candidate, or just going after the issues. I mean, you'd be surprised at the impact that young people can have right now. I mean, you mentioned that I co-chair the Aspen Institute at K-12. Well, now it's up through college on climate education. And what some of those students in high school and 8th grade have been able to do in influencing their school boards and influencing their town councils on how they handle things like waste and energy and all those things, it's amazing. And it's been really impressive. They don't go at it necessarily. For instance, in Hawaii, they've integrated it into everything. I mean, as part of social studies, learning how the native Hawaiians lived off the land, how they managed the land, how it was used. They do, obviously there's science in it, but it goes into their history, it goes into everything. And so it's not built around saying you got to learn about climate, which everybody, you know, climate change, because everybody rolls their eyes, and there are so many, it's become politicized, unfortunately, because it's real, I believe. You sometimes underestimate the impact that you can have by just reaching out and letting the people who represent you at any level know what you think and what's important to you. And you may not always change their opinion, but you can change, it's possible, and you can certainly change the way they prioritize issues.
Great, great. Conversely, what would you say to those young adults who are apathetic about getting involved in the political process in any way whatsoever?
It's your future. And if you want to see it be the kind of future that you feel you deserve, you can't afford to just sit back. I mean, you don't have to get involved. You don't have to run for politics. You don't have to become an activist. You do have to educate yourself, and you do have to vote. And the 18 to 25-year-old vote still hovers around 17% of eligible students, eligible in that group. And you want to say, hey, gang, if you want to see things get better, you can't sit back and let somebody else do it. That's unfortunately how we got into this position, frankly. We were lazy. The average voter turnout in primaries has long been 10 to 12%. 10 to 12% of eligible voters bother to make the choices that you have to decide between come November. And then you get to November and you say, oh, I don't like these choices, so I'm not going to vote. So then the turnout with congressional top of the ticket is usually around 34, 35%. And for president, we think we've done a bang-up job at 55 or 56%. And frankly, those are pathetic numbers. But if you think about it, the people who are going out, that 10% at the very beginning, tend to be the most partisan and the most, they will be passionate about a certain issue usually, one or two issues, and tend to be a little bit more extreme, which is why you end up with candidates you don't like at the top of the ticket. So you've really got to decide, it's a minimum. To live in a democracy, the minimum that we ask is vote.
Absolutely.
Educate yourself and vote.
Absolutely. Can you share a favorite story about your time as governor? A favorite one, if you have one.
Escaping from the state police.
Yeah?
I was very good at that. It was
That's great.
It was stupid and bad to do because, you know, I look at it now, although things weren't nearly as tenuous back then as they were today, and I'm very good at climbing over the fence at Drumthwacket and dropping down into the neighbor's lawn. I'd always call them when I got into Princeton and say, do you know where your governor is? And then I'd tell them so that they wouldn't get in too much trouble. But sometimes living with people who are there 24/7 and being followed around everywhere, especially when you grew up on a farm and I'd get home from school and throw a saddle on my pony or bridle and ride over to my neighbors, you know, you just having that kind of, having a fence around you and Drumthwacket and cameras everywhere, I got to get out of here.
That's such a great story. I love it. Love it. Well, how about this one? How does Whitman 2024 sound?
No, thank you.
Any thoughts about getting involved again?
No, I'm
No,
doing it
that's-
through
through
Forward
those- that's
and
what I
States
figured,
United.
yeah.
No. We need younger people.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm 77, so we need younger people.
Yeah.
hopefully every once in a while they'll talk to the older people and get some wisdom.
Yeah,
But,
right.
you know, it really, you need new ideas. You need new energy. Yeah, you need the ability to conquer the internet and chat GPT and IA, and that is way beyond me.
Yeah.
And frankly, I would actually like to get chat GPT. I've got to download that because that can do some interesting things.
Yeah.
But it's scary, and you need
Yeah.
people who are facile at that. And frankly, after a certain age, as much as we might learn about it, we're not going to be on the cutting edge. And when you need people who are at the cutting edge of these various issues.
Yeah, I hear you for sure. Me too. I have one last one. What final thought would you like to leave our students with?
This is a wonderful country. It has its faults, but nobody else has done what we are doing and still trying to do. We're evolving. Democracy is a ever-evolving process, and we're only going to get it right if you're involved. It's simplistic to say it's your future. We may have mucked it up a lot, but, you know, I have hope. I have hope when I talk to young people and the ones who are really engaged. And it's worth the battle. There's no better way, frankly, to live than what we have here, our form of government. It's not perfect, but it's the best anyone else has seen, frankly. And we need to keep it, and it's fragile, and now's the time. Now's the time.
Absolutely. That was amazing. Thank you so very much, Governor Whitman.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Thank you
My
so much.
pleasure. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Happy holidays to all. Yeah.
We really appreciate it. Holly said you were going to do a meet and greet. Are you still going to do that?
Sure.
Yeah? Okay. I have something for you. Everybody stay where you... Oh, you want to do a picture?
That's the school.
Don't go anywhere.